She stood with a towel raised to the side of her wet hair. "Is that you, Will Summers?" Summers turned his horse in Layla's direction. "Yes, ma'am, Layla," he said. "It's me." The cur sprang to a stand and loped across the yard, leading him. "I brought Lee the mule he asked for." His hat still in hand, he gestured it back toward the grave and said respectfully, "I see he won't be needing it now." Layla stood drying her hair for a moment and looked over at the grave. Then she raised the towel again. "No, he won't need it now," she said. "I will, though. I'll be moving back down to Prospect." After a moment's pause, she said, "How much for the mule?" Summers considered the question quickly. "Lee paid for it in advance, Layla." He pulled the string forward until the mule stood nearest to his side. "So here it is, delivered as promised. It's all yours." "Oh, really?" Layla said skeptically. She put a hand on her hip, the damp towel hanging from it. "Lee Persons never paid in advance for anything in his life, so let's try again." She gave him a sharp, knowing smile. "How much for the mule, Will?" she repeated. "I'm not a charity case." Summers looked her up and down, her wet hair hanging to her shoulders, Lee's old shirt open deep down the front and clinging to her wet breasts. He looked away, but his eyes kept drifting back to her. "How long has he been dead?" he asked. "It's been weeks since he died," Layla said. "I'm going to say 10 weeks at the least." She stared over at the grave as she spoke. "I wrapped him and laid him in the spring house until the ground thawed. I finally buried him 3 days ago." She paused, then added, "I'm past grieving him." "I see," said Summers. He put on his hat and crossed his wrists on the saddle horn. 10 weeks. "At the least," Layla pointed out quietly, her hand still on her hip. "I woke up in the night because the fire had gone out. I found him lying there, dead, eyes wide open. He was clutching his chest." Summers shook his lowered head. At the edge of the porch, the big cur had plopped down again and sat staring back and forth between them as if following the conversation. "He was a good man, Lee Persons," Summers said. He considered it for a second, shrugged, and added, "Good enough, anyway." "Yes, he was," Layla said. "And now he is dead and buried," she said bluntly, trying to get past the subject of Lee Persons and on with whatever came next. Summers sighed. He looked away again, then set his gaze back on Layla. Long, shallow skiffs of snow still clung to shadowed rock ledges and low spots up on the steep hillsides. 10 weeks, huh?" he said, giving her a curious look. 10 weeks, Will," Layla repeated, staring knowingly back at him. "How many times are you going to ask me that?" "That's all," Summers gave a shrug. "Good," said Layla. "How much for the sorrel mule?" she asked again. "I hate to take money from you, Layla," Summers said. "Then don't," she said. She stared at him. "What I mean is I hate to charge you anything, Lee dying and all," Summers said. "I want you to, Will," Layla said bluntly. "Do I have to spell it out for you?" "Jesus," Summers whispered, looking down at his crossed wrists. After a moment, he shook his bowed head and swung down from his saddle. "No, Layla," he said. "I just didn't want to take advantage." "Get yourself in here," she said, gesturing toward the door. "Yes, ma'am," said Summers. Atop a high ridge overlooking the Persons' cabin, Arlo Hughes, Dow Bendigo, and his half-breed brother Tom Cat Tracker Bendigo sat atop their horses and watched the man and woman from the shelter of trees and rock. "Fine-looking animals," Arlo Hughes said in a hushed tone. The other 2 men offered no reply. In the faded evening light, the 3 watched Will Summers take his rifle from his boot and untie his saddlebags. He threw them over his shoulder, carried his Winchester repeater, and followed Layla Brooks into the cabin. At a height of 200 feet, both man and woman looked small. So did the short stretch of turned earth in the front yard.